Doom rocket launcher build, part 3, rockets from scratch. I don't have a whole lot of time today to build, so I figured I'd change gears and show you how to build rockets from scratch. And I have this kit that I got a long time ago that has a bunch of pieces that I'm going to use and some scrap balsa wood. And you can pick this stuff up at hobby stores. This kit was Mean Machine, and I think it's some other stuff from Estes, but I've got some old rocket motors in here and some old balsa wood from some rockets that I built before. So I'm going to use this stuff to make the rocket, or at least one rocket, for the rocket launcher, and show you how to do one without any plans. It's going to be good. Alright, first step is deciding which size rocket you're going to make. We're working with a 3-inch launcher tube, so these are the motors that we're going to use. They fit inside of this diameter, so the entire rocket body can be the size of the motor, which would give us bigger stabilization fins on the side since we're only working with 3 inches. But this would look a lot cooler coming out, but then our fins are going to be really small, so they'll have to trail a lot or something. I'm going to build one of each, and then we'll see how they work out when it's all done. So our tube has an inner diameter of 76.2 millimeters. Your fins are going to be excessively small on the large tube. They're only that big. Versus this one, where they're substantially larger. Now when you're making the fins for the rockets, the wood cannot sit like this. If the grain goes that direction, the fins can snap off very easily because the balsa wood has like no strength this way. They'll snap off inside the tube. I know this from experience. So in order to make them not snap off and be sturdy enough to handle it, you have the wood grain sweep back and it connects to the rocket across there, and then you don't have to worry about it, and it all works out. Now I'm going to cut out some templates and make some rocket fins. Now that I have my 4 fins cut out, if I really want to make them even, I can just take them and hold them together very carefully and sand all the edges. So it helps if you have a little clamp that you can put on them. Basically hold them all together and then sand all the edges until all the fins are exactly even and the same, and you'll have 4 absolutely identical rocket fins. I'm not going to sand mine to make them all even though, because I know what happens to these rockets when you fire them horizontally out of a rocket launcher. They get beat up. They hit the ground a lot. So these are temporary. Usually you have to replace the fins a fair amount. So I'll just keep my little stencil pieces here and yeah, replace them if they get busted. I'm counting on these getting broken. I could use more resilient materials, but you want the light weight of the balsa wood. That's why people use this stuff for rockets, because it weighs next to nothing. There might be something else out there. You know, I could use fiberglass or carbon fiber or something like that to build these things, but that would take a long time and it would be really expensive. So I'm going to use this stuff. It's cheap, it's easy, and rockets. I figured that if you guys don't have tubes for your rockets, I'd explain how you can make them. You just take paper, spread glue on it, and wrap it around the rocket motor. And don't put glue on the rocket motor part, that way you can get the rocket motor out. But that's how you can make a tube. So if you don't have tubes, that's how you can get those without having to buy them. And then the only other issue is, and you could do this with either size nose cone. I have a nose cone for the small tube, but I don't have any for the big one. So King Random used plastic champagne glasses for nose cones on his rockets. But I don't have any plastic champagne glasses, but I do have dirt and water and a bowl and a spoon and this little spice thing that spins. So I'm going to try to make a form for a nose cone, and I have some epoxy, and I'm going to mix the epoxy and try to make a nose cone out of epoxy. And if this works and you have epoxy, well, if you have the same stuff that I have, you can make a nose cone also. Cheap, at your house. I'm also going to use paper towels, so I'm making basically a composite. I'll get the paper towels soaked with epoxy, and then I'll lay them in, and I'll get a nose cone out. Hopefully. Let's throw fins on our tubes and then figure out how long we want them to be. To make your fin marking guide, take a piece of paper and cut it to the size of the fin, and then wrap it around the tube that you're going to use. Make sure it's nice and straight, and then tape it in place. Now slide it off the tube. Now to get your locations for your fins, just fold it in half, and then fold that in half. To make it easier to see your fin locations, just mark the paper where your folds are at. This will make sure that your fins are at perfect 90-degree angles from each other, you know, the whole way around the rocket. Carefully get your tube back inside the paper. It's a pain in the butt. Once the paper is back on, mark your tube where your marks are at. There we go. And you've got your fin location marks. I'm going to use super glue to attach my fins, and then I'll use epoxy to reinforce them. Just a tiny bit of super glue. And then the biggest thing is just to make sure they're 90 degrees. They're attached. Now I'll just reinforce them with the epoxy and cut my tube to length. Epoxy reinforced. The nose cone still isn't hard for the big one, so I cut the small tube to length and glued the fins on, and I just used the fin guide to cut the tube off straight, and then I stuck the nose cone in. I need to pack the parachute in there to get the weight correct, and then I'll find the balance point, which is back here right now, just behind the start of the fins, and then I'll tie a string to it at that location once everything's in the front, and I'll spin it around, and if it flies correctly, when I spin it around on a string, like swinging around my head, it will show that it probably will have good flight when it's actually in the air. And this is actual rocket surgery, and what you have to do is figure out if at the center of balance, if it has more drag behind that point than it does in front of it, which allows it to stay traveling forward, basically, and not wobble around and fly crazy and smash into stuff. So as long as my balance point is right on this, it should fly wonderfully. And if the fins are past the forward balance point, I may have to cut them down some because you don't want to add drag in front of the balance point, which is why the nose cone doesn't matter that much, like I was talking about earlier, because the nose cone is really far in front of the balance point, so it does cause some drag, but the amount of drag a smooth shaped object like this causes versus these giant fins that are causing a massive amount of drag is insignificant. So I'll pack the stuff in the front and we'll do a string test. Got my string tied on at the balance point. So now it's time to go outside and swing it around. Success! Alright, the small rocket's basically done. All I need to do is tie the parachute to the nose cone, glue the nose cone shock cord to the inside of the rocket tube, and then bam, it's finished, except for motor retention if it needs it. This motor fits super tight, so I don't really think I need it on this, but in order to do that, you measure the motor, you mark on the body where that's at, you punch holes, you run a wire across, and it keeps the motor from pushing itself through the rocket tube whenever it launches. The only other thing that might be an issue is once this is inside of the tube, if it falls forward, you put another set of wires right here that spring loads it in the front that holds it up level so that it slides out of the tube easy. Other than that, rockets are done. I'm just going to do the same things that I did to this one on the one with the big tube right here and see how that works, which I don't have high hopes for this because the fins have to be so small. Could have spring loaded them maybe, but oh well, doesn't matter. Stay tuned for next time. I couldn't do the rockets tomorrow because it's supposed to rain all day and therefore I won't be able to do the string test outside. So tomorrow I'm going to be working on the rocket launcher itself in part 4. I'm going to get those electronics put in there, hopefully get it shaped, and start finishing it up, maybe work on the electrical ignition system a little bit. So remember, if you care, like and share. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more awesome stuff.
Back from the dead.